could just go out and spend money and buy players. Who cares about developing them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go to a country like Portugal, and I mean, everybody there, but FC Porto essentially is living off of that model of bringing in younger players and turning them into, bona fide stars and selling them off to bigger clubs. I mean, that's that's just how some teams work, and other teams don't, and that's definitely a big factor, I think.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with what both y'all are saying with that. And I mean, we just saw, like I mentioned, just Sargent signed with Werder Bremen. What are your thoughts on that? On Sargent going to the Bundesliga, Dan?
I'm excited. I think it's just based on everything like we just said in terms of the opportunities he'll get as a young player there in Germany in general, and also Bremen is a great academy. They've produced some really good attacking players in recent times, so it's definitely going to be a good fit, I think, for him there. So it's definitely exciting. He'll get a year essentially with their U19 team. And then after that, he'll age out of that after his first year there, and then move up to their reserves and hopefully at some point make a splash enough to get into the first team and take advantage of an opportunity there. So big moves for him. He's got a huge amount of talent. I mean, he was we all saw the U20 World Cup this summer. It was just it was just phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, records just shattered. He was, I think, just super young, and he's going to play the U17 World Cup next month as well. So it just kind of goes to show sort of how young he is.
Well, I mean, he's so young that he can't technically sign with Werder Bremen until he turns 18 in February. So, he's only 17 years old, which is a huge statement for Americans. A bigger statement is why he didn't sign with Bayern Munich or Borussia Dortmund, who were keen on him as well. Why do you think he chose Werder Bremen over those two clubs?
It's always an interesting question, I think. I would hope that it has to do with them, being him and his family and his agents, sort of taking a look at the club in general, their sort of stance and how much they're willing to kind of invest in him, whether it be training wise or just kind of the amount of effort they're going to put into his development. And then also, just looking at the other players that are there, someone like Dortmund, they may have, a striker who's the same age and, really good and kind of in the same pipeline, and he'd be competing with him. Whereas somebody like Bremen might not have that. So he's sort of going to slide in and sort of take over their spot in the U19 team. So I'm not really sure, but I think it's I'm hoping there's some thought process there.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, I truly think that someone was in his ear just like, hey, look, I think this might be a better opportunity for you compared to the other places such as Bayern and Dortmund. And I mean, like we discussed earlier, I mean, I feel like almost any of those top Bundesliga sides are a good side to go to developmental wise, and because they're not afraid to play the youth. And I mean, too many times we see teams some of them are a little too afraid to play the youth, but these German teams, such as what Schalke has done with McKennie, just seem to integrate these younger players almost seamlessly of sorts into their starting lineups and whatnot. So I think absolutely, I think it's a great opportunity for Sargent.
Yeah, these kids who are kind of distributed all over the world, especially the youngsters. Now this is a question for both you guys. When do you think we will actually see them break through the national team and start replacing the older guys? If you look at the current squad, there were only 4 players who were younger than 22 when it came to the recent call-up. Now, we're going to get the call-up roster here in the next couple of weeks for the next round of qualifying. 7, meanwhile, were over the age of 32. 3 were the goalkeepers. But the 7 were Dempsey, Wondolowski, Beasley, Howard, Guzan, and Nick Mirando. So, to put it in perspective, England had 3 at the U20 who were younger than 22. But shouldn't Bruce Arena start to sprinkle in some of these youngsters to A, get them experience, and B, also start to set that next generation of the national team?
I definitely think I'm fully on board with that. I mean, I think we're kind of almost hitting a gap where we didn't have a generation of players who are now 22, 23 really pan out like we thought they would, whether it be just talent wise or just situationally. Guys like Emerson Hyndman and Perry Kitchen that were sort of supposed to be at that point now where they were taking over for Bradley. We do have guys like Kalen Acosta who's doing a good job, I think, of sort of breaking in and making a spot. But we really missed out on that sort of the Olympic team of last year. So of guys really being able to come in and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they're ready to take over. So I think that's part of it. And then also the fact that these games are so important that it's kind of hard for Arena to bring in a guy who's 19, 20 and has really never played at this level before. So yeah, it's tough. I hope once we kind of get through the World Cup qualifying that we can kind of find a way to start working them in as soon as possible.
Absolutely, Dan. I agree with that last statement a lot. I wish Bruce would, but I can't blame him because basically they're fighting for the World Cup lives. Yeah. Now, would you rather have Weston McKennie or a more experienced guy? I mean that question is pretty obvious. Now, what I think Bruce should do is hopefully he gives maybe one or two of those last spots to one or two of these European kids, European, but these two younger Americans that are abroad. So maybe a Weston McKennie or somebody else. Hell, Weston McKennie might even break into the lineup, maybe replacing Acosta. I don't know what's going to happen a year from now, but I do think Arena needs to integrate maybe one or two of these younger guys, maybe into a World Cup roster, just to give them the experience and the taste. And then when 2022 rolls around, I know we're talking about 2022. Geez, that's a while away. But when 2022 comes around, those guys
hope they get into the squad.
Yeah. If they get in, if they get into the cup and the squad. But once that comes around, if those guys have progressed well enough, then they'll be maybe a little bit more experienced than some of their counterparts. But I can't blame Bruce for not giving these guys a chance, especially in the circumstances he's in right now.
No, and I think the blame is not necessarily on Bruce. It is part on Bruce, part on Klinsmann, but it's a lot on the players. Because if the players had performed well, if the United States had picked up points in the World Cup qualifying, you'd be able to give these last two games here, and you'd probably be able to bring in some of the new youngsters to give them some World Cup qualifying experience, knowing that you've already qualified. These games are almost meaningless. You might go up and down the standings, but you're going to Russia. Who cares if you finish second to third? Maybe if you really want to get into logistics of the plot of the pots and all that, group staging, fine. But the fact that we're struggling so much is not benefiting these kids who are making names for themselves by playing in Germany.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can't. If you don't present them the opportunity to come in and not have to, go to Honduras and play for the team's, chances at a World Cup, then, that's just not feasible. So you need to have a way to bring them in. And yeah, like you said, if they could come in and play a competitive match that really was kind of meaningless, that would be sort of ideal. But we're definitely not at that point anymore. And we've got to do everything we can now to qualify. So.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. But this week we did see Weston McKennie make his debut, and he did not look out of place. I watched parts of the game before I had to go to class. I know Steven watched parts of the game. I know you watched the game, Dan.
Yep.
What are y'all thoughts? I thought he looked completely. It didn't look like he was out of place. I thought he was well, and he earned a second start this past weekend as well. So, what were your thoughts on his play?
Yeah, I think it's, just in terms of the team in general, this isn't, really a situation where, guys are hurt and they're sort of dipping into their youth. He's a member of their squad at this point. There's no real big injuries right now that Schalke have. And, the coach just kind of went with him and as a a situational kind of thing. He wanted a more defensive center mid. They have more attacking center mids, but they went with him. And yeah, he definitely did not look out of place. I mean, tactically, he's aware. Technically, he's right up to speed with all these guys. He can play balls over the top. He can hold possession when needed. He did get caught out a little bit, tracking back, I think, a few times, and maybe even once on one of the goals that they scored. But other than that, he looks really well rounded, and I think just kind of the perfect center mid that Schalke look for. They like.
No, I definitely agree. If you're Kellen Acosta right now, you're starting to sweat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he's young. I'm young. Kellen Acosta, if I'm Kellen Acosta, I'm young. He's young. What difference does it make if it's him or you? You know what I'm saying? So, and Kellen Acosta hasn't been playing well for FC Dallas, or with FC Dallas struggling, you might not get the same recognition. He's playing with Schalke. He's making these big plays. He fits in well. Tactically, he's aware of everything. He can play well through the air, on the ground. He passes well. He's in the right spots at the right time. Bruce Arena will definitely be considering him, I think, in the next couple of days to maybe replace Kellen Acosta, somebody who's also young, but you're not changing the entire dynamics of the U.S. men's national team, and you're getting a youngster the opportunity to play. Interestingly, Kellen Acosta and McKennie are from Dallas area, so the Dallas connection is very strong.
Yep, they're both from Dallas. Actually, I tell the story a lot of people. McKennie actually played in a middle school. When we were in middle school, we played in a match, and he actually scored a midfield chip on our keeper. So I mean, the talent was always there for him, and especially when we're looking at our goalie like, come on, man. But little we know this guy be professional playing against Bayern Munich. But I mean, I feel like, I don't know, Steven. Do you think he would have had the same, success if he was maybe at Dallas compared to Schalke? I know this might be kind of a dumb question because Schalke is a much better side than Dallas. But do you think it would have been a much different scenario or whatnot?
I think it's not a bad question to ask, because if you are a youngster and you're looking at wanting to break through professionally, are you going to want to put your chips into the basket of MLS, or you want to take your chances overseas? We know the risk about going overseas because you can easily be forgotten. Okay, there's so many footballers in Europe that you suddenly become less important. If you do break through an MLS squad, you're more guaranteed playing time. You're guaranteed the opportunity to showcase your talent to Bruce Arena, who is located here in the U.S. and no, nationally, you showcase your talent nationally on televisions and all that. I don't know. What's your take, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a gamble, and I think I'm no professional athlete by any means, but if I was, and if I can just imagine if I'm an 18-year-old kid and I've got this this talent. It's still, you've got to realize that no matter what, if it's MLS or Germany or wherever, it's a big risk no matter what. So I feel like if you're going to take a risk and you're going to, go and try and be a professional player, you might as well go where the ceiling's high. I think you look at the MLS and best case scenario is like you said, where you break into the team and you're playing in front of the national team coach, which is always obviously the goal. But I think for a lot of these guys who have ambition and want to really get up to that highest level, there's really no way to do that in MLS right now. So I think it's kind of hard to tell a kid that age to say hey, let's kind of dampen the fire here and just kind of stick with MLS and kind of play it safe here. It's always going to be, go big or go home. So I think that's kind of the driving factor there. Everybody just kind of wants to, see what they can do and put their talents up against the best.
No, absolutely, Dan. Now I got a question for you that I'm always on the lookout for some Americans abroad. Can you give us like a couple of maybe that aren't really household names that could be household names relatively soon of some Americans abroad?
Yeah, one you actually mentioned earlier briefly is Mackenzie Gaines, who's I believe another Texas native.
Yeah, another Dallas kid. Yep,
coming out of there in droves. He's I really like him. I've